All right, thanks. All right, Real Estate and Open Space Committee is returning to regular session. Did everybody get the minutes from, let's see, what was the date? Oh, yeah, no, that was the last one. February 16th, 2024. Wow.
Yep.
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
Are you going to read the introduction to the? Aren't you supposed to?
Of what?
That was for
I
the
don't
other
know,
one.
in past.
Was for
in other
executive
meet-
session, I didn't.
You don't do that with?
Some people do, some people don't. I don't think it's necessary.
you need
I
to.
know Elaine was always,
I know, but I don't think it's necessary, so.
But I think you don't
Yeah.
have to do that just to make. a
I will
motion.
read the recording and taping notification, though. As required by law, town may audio or video record this meeting. Any person intending to either audio or video record this open session is required to inform the chair. Is there any notices of that? Okay. All right, so I need a motion to approve the minutes of February 16th, 2024.
I move approval.
I second. Is there any discussion about the minutes?
Actually, I
Yes.
do.
Okay.
Just want to congratulate Carol on really doing a nice job. That it makes a huge difference to have really substantive minutes, particularly if there's a long gap from one meeting to the next. You know, when I
Absolutely.
read through them, it's like, oh yeah, that's where we left off. You know, so it really helps.
Oh, that's good.
So,
Oh, that's a nice
Thank you,
compliment.
thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, hearing no additional discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, hearing no abstentions or nays, the minutes are approved. Anyone for public comment? No, okay. Okay, the update on the open space and recreation plan. I don't really have any notes on that. I do know that HCT just sent out a survey to their membership regarding the open space and recreation plan in terms of like participating in that, if they were interested. Do you have anything to add, Margot?
Yeah, there's going to be a workshop next week, on Tuesday, the 26th, from 4 to 6 p.m. in this room.
Tuesday or Wednesday?
It's Tuesday, is it? No, I'm sorry, you're right. It's the 26th, which is Wednesday. Sorry,
Right.
I'm getting my dates mixed up. Yeah, so Wednesday, the 26th, here in the Griffin Room, and from 4 to 6, and it's an opportunity for people to come in and give some feedback about what they see as being priorities for open space and recreation in the town going forward. And there'll be some sort of different stations set up around the room with maps and that kind of thing, so that you can, get some dialogue going. It's not somebody
Yeah.
giving a long speech.
I wouldn't be surprised if you do get people wanting to talk about recreation,
Mhm.
especially pickleballers and stuff like that, because they, are a fairly vocal group in terms of the needs and wants of the community,
Yeah.
as they see it anyway, so, yeah.
Yeah, and we've heard a lot about trying to get improved recreational programs for kids too.
Right,
So, I think there's a lot of interest in this, but also on the open space side, because
Yeah.
there is a survey which you can access online through, if you go to the, if you go to the town's website, you can find it, and it's basically it's quite a detailed survey that asks people what their priorities are, what areas do they use in town, what
Right.
facilities do they think are good, which ones need improvements, what kinds of improvements, all of that sort of thing, and it runs the gamut from active recreation to like ball fields and pickleball courts and that kind of thing, to our open space resources for, walking and.
Walking trails and,
Bird watching and all that kind of thing. So, it's important. This is a really important plan, and it will be folded into the, local comprehensive plan.
right.
So, but it's in much, much greater detail than the local comprehensive plan on this particular topic. So,
And so do you know where else that they have been sort of promoting this survey, that people would see that they could participate?
Well, the various members of, there's a committee that's been working on the open space
Mhm.
plan, which I've been participating in that, as well as Mike.
Mm-hmm,
The town planner, Christine Flynn, and Amy
Mhm.
Usowski
mm-hmm,
are sort of heading that up at the staff level. And then most of the relevant town department heads sit on that group. So we
Okay.
have somebody from recreation,
Yeah.
we have somebody from conservation,
right,
you know, so forth. And so that group has basically been trying to reach out to their constituent
okay,
people that, you know, have an interest in
Okay.
this, to get them to give us some feedback.
okay. All right, thank you. All right, update on the status of the Judah Eldridge property. I was not at the Board of Selectmen meeting when this was discussed, but I did get a message via the Board of Selectmen to the chairman of the Community Preservation Committee to announce at the last meeting, which I did announce, that the Judah Eldridge property land transfer has been completed. Town now owns the property, as far as I know. And in terms of the funding, as you'll recall, $369,000 was funded through Community Preservation Act funds. And originally, it was said that that was going to pay off the tax lien. That is no longer the case. They've had to put aside some additional funding to make up the gap for what the property is currently assessed at, which now is 700 and something thousand. They are going to prepare a warrant article for either special town meeting in the fall or the regular meeting in May, and I believe ask for that total amount of funding from free cash or some other source, and the $369,000 will be returned to the Community Preservation Act Fund.
Wow.
And will not be used to pay off the tax lien. So that is the final word on that. Do you have any additional information, Dave?
Yeah, well, I was at the meeting.
Right.
And I spoke up. And as well as Dave did, and
Yeah.
Elaine raised some issues too. But it turns out that they actually closed on the appraisal. They did a taking in July, which was news to me.
Right.
Last July?
And
Yeah.
it, in there was a decision, because this would be land court. The decision was that the value of the property was 1 million plus,
Okay.
okay? Now, the town, at the time, the town meetings, as you pointed out, there was a 369 from CPC in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And last year's town meeting threw in another $400,000.
Right.
Mhm.
And this was to go to pay off anybody from the heirs of Judah Eldridge.
It was good to go in
Who would come
escrow,
forward.
escrow for that, correct?
It was to go into escrow. The question over all of this time, since 2018 to now, I could never get an answer from anybody on, when I said, well, what's gonna happen to that money
Mhm.
if people don't come forward? Well, about 2 days before the selectmen's meeting, I found out, I got a copy of a report that said, oh, they're gonna take it and move it into taxes, which sent me through the roof. I said, this is all wrong. I did learn at the selectmen's meeting that, in fact, they couldn't take it for taxes unless the town did some sort of abatement. I don't understand how abatements work and so forth. This is a difference between municipal accounting and commercial accounting that I'm more familiar with. But in order to take for taxes, they have to create an abatement fund, and they use the abatement fund to pay the taxes. So the town's, here's some money, we're gonna take it back.
Mhm.
They didn't do that. They did an eminent domain taking for conservation purposes, and therefore, that comes off the table. So, anyway,
And is it the understanding it doesn't need to have an escrow account then? For a
Well,
period of time? For a period of time? Remember, they used to say for 3 years or
3
something?
years. Well, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That they really need an escrow account of 1 million plus,
Oh,
okay? They're not going to, so they're at a risk.
okay.
If suddenly the entire 300 or 400 heirs of Judah Eldridge come forward and say, we want our money, they wouldn't in fact, have to come up with money for let's say 1.1 million. I think it was something like that.
But the tax lien has to be paid off by those heirs also before they can claim
Right.
anything, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure how they're gonna pull this off.
Okay.
I basically said, I think this stinks. I mean, it doesn't pass the smell test, was the term that I
Well.
used. And I said, and Dave got it very strong about the fact that, he felt misled when they kept delaying, giving him information and so forth. And Mike says, well, look, all this money's coming back, it's just money. When the tax money comes back, they take it, I don't know what the whole transaction is. They take the money in the taxes, and what they're gonna do is pay off the taxes and shove the money back over to CPC. They're committing it back to CPC.
it's
Well,
just
if you think about it, tax money goes into the operational fund,
Right.
right? So they're gonna grab all of the money that CPC gave, plus the money they got last year at town meeting, came out of operational,
Right.
okay? They're gonna take that money, it ends all back up in operational funds. They're now gonna say, we're gonna pay that money back to CPC. Because it's not allocated to anything other than, it's,
Bottom line,
bottom
bottom
line
line is that
is, we're getting the
the
money back.
land is now owned by the town and preserved, which is what we had initially wanted. And number two, the funding has been resolved in that funds are not going to be used to pay back taxes, and that will be returned to the CPA fund to be used for additional open space
Right.
acquisitions.
But it
So,
sounds like more than the
that's taxpayer
369.
money, that's
The other-
taxpayer money.
The remaining $300,000 or $400,000 that they haven't got for it,
Mm.
it's basically, it's a risk factor. If all of these people came forward, they would have to come up with another $400,000.
That's not,
Under
But
which circumstances they
CPC's
couldn't put
only
money.
getting 369
that's
back.
all we gave them.
Right, right,
That's right.
that was what I couldn't
That's
understand.
provided that a significant portion of the heirs don't come forward. So I'm not sure how quickly we're gonna see the money.
Okay, well,
That's up for them to figure out. But let's put it this way, there was a commitment from the Board of Selectmen.
mhm.
They individually voted, they individually approved. And am I correct, Brad? Have you said anything incorrect about what happened in that meeting? Or you weren't at the meeting either, were you? No. So,
I wasn't there, but it doesn't sound, it sounds like they're in order.
so anyway, they've committed, we've got a copy of the Harwich Channel
Yeah,
video
yeah.
that was taken.
Right.
And so there's something that we
Oh, I
We
think
have-
we're okay.
fairly firm commitment until somebody
right.
tries to pull games, and then we'll start playing.
All right.
games again.
All right. Okay, member reports. Do you have anything on the local comprehensive plan, Mark?
Not at this point, no.
Okay,
I mean, it's
Moving-
moving along. but,
moving along.
yeah.
Okay. Dave, do you have anything on
Nope.
anything? Okay. Marcy? Carol? Brad, do you have anything to report?
Nothing.
Okay, I'll just report very briefly on the Community Preservation Committee meeting, our most recent meeting, only because it was our public information meeting, so it was our annual public information meeting that we're mandated to have.
Mhm.
And members of the public can come and express what they see as maybe wants and needs of the community that perhaps Community Preservation Act funds can be used to support that. Sometimes we have no one come, sometimes we have a number of people come. And we actually had a gentleman come who had presented us with a letter and some additional backup materials of some of his concerns. I was running the meeting, so I briefly had gotten the letter 5 minutes before, but I had briefly read it and realized that the concerns really didn't pertain to Community Preservation Act funds, but, we wanted to give him his time. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because one of his concerns was that he felt that we weren't really in the business of preserving land any longer. I think that there was some confusion as to when the land bank actually ended and the Community Preservation Act took over, which sort of, as we all know, became a little bit more encompassing of other things, because he kept saying, you're supporting building bathrooms and, restrooms for the recreation things, but not necessarily preserving land. So that was one of his points. Which was just something to think about in terms of, as we move forward in terms of preserving land. And then we had another gentleman who spoke, who had recently submitted an application this past year, so was new to the whole process. And he wanted to comment on the process, not that he had a problem with it himself, but that he just thought things could be clarified. And one of his most interesting points was that we, as a committee, the Community Preservation Committee, only act and vote on things that are presented to us, okay? And so, which is absolutely true. We don't really go out and solicit the community. So if someone doesn't know about it, it doesn't really necessarily come before us. I mean, our plates are full. I mean, we do anything between 12 and 16 applications, in the application season. So let's say September to, January or something. But yeah, we only do look at the things that are presented. And perhaps that's just something to think about moving forward in terms of land preservation, in that I thought to myself, well, yeah, we've had this conversation before in the past, that we react. We react to what comes before us. We react to if HCT brings us something or whatever. We tried to be more proactive with the tax lien lists and the owners unknown lists, and we still have not made significant progress. Is there another venue or another way? Perhaps. We've had conversations, and I know, Marga, you've been part of them, and Dave too, about some of the areas in town that we know of, parcels that are like maybe owned by someone, and then they have owners unknown near them or tax lien near them, and they are part of a greater conglomeration of potential for preserving or something. And we don't really have a process for acting on those. And I just mentioned it because it was something that came up at the meeting as just a thought process of how we can maybe think more broadly, more strategically.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the only reason I bring it up, so.
I think we're actually, we're really lucky that we have the trust who is thinking strategically about, what land remains out there and its relative value to other things. And that we've had such a good partnership with them over the years, and the expertise there to do the deals,
I also think that the trust has built such extreme relationships with owners of some of these larger tracts of land in particular, and has cultivated those relationships for sometimes like 10, 12 years, and then something will, so I mean, and that's due to Mike and his team. And so you're absolutely right about that. Yeah. I just didn't know if that, we as a committee, if there's something else we should be thinking of.
When you say we, do you mean Rios or CPC?
Rios.
Oh, so.
CPC is just the funding. And
So
we depend on the committees to kind of feed us
Right.
information about, things. So,
but just for my notes
Yeah.
here. So at your CPC, the CPC most recent meeting,
Yeah.
person presented concerns, but, and then there was another gentleman connected with the process.
Yeah, who
Who-
talked about how we only deal with what is presented to us.
At the CPC meeting?
Yeah,
or-
at the CPC
Oh,
meeting.
okay.
So what I'm saying is that it kind of goes hand in hand. You know, each of these committees be thinking differently, you know?
Yeah.
Again, the whole question of being more proactive versus
And
reactive.
there was a time when this committee was a lot more proactive. And I think, in a way, the trust has kind of taken over that role. The trust was new then and not nearly as experienced or knowledgeable. So we've,
Do you think that had to do with the land bank funds too, the more availability of funds and?
yeah, I mean, because this committee was the recommending body straight to town meeting.
Okay.
You know, in other
This
words,
committee meaning Rios.
Rios,
I'm getting
yeah.
confused with
Yeah,
them
I
going
mean,
back and
back in the early days of the land bank, this committee's role was to research, find land, and, you know, people would come to us, but we also were kind of looking around saying, what's important to protect here?
Right.
And making some, you know, some inquiries. That role has kind of evolved to be the trust's role. And as long as we're working in partnership with them, I think it works.
I
you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot has to do with the funding though, since we don't have a large source of funding anymore like we used to. I mean, our only source of funding, if we have something here at Rios, is CPA funds.
Right.
You know, whereas the involvement with the trust, they bring their own funding and then add to it.
Yeah, and they have the ability to do the grant applications that are necessary to raise the outside funds and to do private fundraising too. So, I mean, the CPA money, and the support of this committee for various projects have been essential to making those deals work. So I mean, I think we still have an important role to play, but it's being more professionally driven, and I actually think that's a good thing.
Okay, all right. Dave?
The land bank funding, I realize it's been paid off. Now, that was paid out of what part of CPC funds? Was
No,
it-
so
was it-
the land bank existed prior
Right,
to 2004.
right.
Okay, in 2004, it was, I guess, transferred sort of in, and the CPA kind of,
Yeah,
Kind of
basically,
was
it's
a-
super, the town voted to convert from land bank funding to CPA funding, and thereby broadening the mission.
Right.
of what those funds could be used for.
right.
But what I'm getting at, it, we've been paying.
Yes.
The land bank was a loan, basically, borrowed money.
No, I mean, it was a fund, it's exactly the same as CPA in terms of the funding mechanism. It's a surcharge on the property tax.
Right, but we
it
borrowed
goes into a
against it, but we
special
borrowed against it.
You
Yes,
borrowed
we
against-
did do a
Right.
lot of
Okay,
borrowing
so-
in the early
So I'm talking
years.
about the
Yes.
borrowing has been complete, you know, the
Yes.
payments have been done on that.
This last year
Now that
was the
those-
last
those-
amount.
Therefore, does the ability, was those payments being paid out of CPA conservation restricted funds?
No.
Or was it coming out of the general
It
fund?
was coming out of the general fund, I believe.
Okay, so that,
It didn't affect the
That-
open
that now
space,
says it-
didn't affect the open space bucket, so to speak.
right, okay.
Yeah.
So that means basically the amount of funds that CPA, the CPC has to it this coming year has gone up considerably.
Not considerably, no, because the land bank debt decreased over time. So in the time period that I've been with the Community Preservation Committee since 2011 or 12. Let's say at one time it was 750,000, and the next year 720,000 and such. This last payment was maybe like 180,000 or 200,000. So it
So
decreased.
it's been adding,
It's been decreasing every year,
the
yes.
payments have been
Yes.
decreasing.
Right.
Right, so,
So but, and therefore your unrestricted funds in CP, C monies
mhm.
has been slowly growing? Is
Yes.
that- is that
Yeah.
where- That's
Yeah.
where it grows,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
Do you know off the top of your head, Kathy, where we stand right now in terms of available money for open space?
Well, this past year, as you know, this past May, we funded 150 and 100 from the open space fund, I think. So that was 250. I think there might have been, well, there was the land grant from 400 from Coppola's property.
Right.
So there's probably a couple hundred in there, and then they'll get another couple hundred. So with this next fiscal year of funding,
Yeah,
it's probably at least, there'll be at least 400,000 in there,
okay,
just as a round
Right,
number,
right.
so.
okay.
so.
Is there any restriction, could that money be used for research on owners unknown, or,
The,
you know, to be able to acquire it for conservation purposes?
The
And here's-
CPA money?
Just as an example, of the project we discussed in executive session,
mhm,
there are parcels around it that are owners unknown,
okay,
that could be added into that,
okay, well,
for
as
example.
you know,
But it-
the town put aside 2 years ago, 500,000
Yeah.
for title, research, et cetera, in those areas. Only 8,000 has been spent thus far. So, okay, and in addition, as you know, when they voted to sell those parcels of land on Queen Anne, they said those were gonna be used for the same thing. So I do think that there's money in the town, and I might be wrong, but I do think that there's money in the town coffers right now specifically for those particular things. I think it's a matter of, you know, do they have the manpower and, you know, to pursue priority-wise, those kind of things. I don't know, so.
I'm just, I think someplace along there, we should understand more about those monies and how they're, you know, the $8,000 that's been spent, what was it spent on?
I think
I-
it was spent on the woman that they had doing the title. They had hired an out,
This was a long time ago.
yeah,
You know, this, he's talking about the 8,000
This
from
is-
the 500,000.
Out of the 500,000?
You're talking about money from something else.
Okay.
It's taken them a long time. There's not a lot of people that do the kind of research that you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's been many interruptions in the process. Let's, you know, I don't want to, you know, sort of belabor the issue. It's become a priority according to the Board of Selectmen, so let's just hope that we can kind of, you know, keep nudging them in that direction. I don't know what else to, you know, say, so. They've got some funding right now, and we'll see what happens, so. Brad, do you have anything else? Anybody have anything else that they'd like to share under member reports?
No.
Okay. Next meeting date to be determined. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded?
All in favor? Aye.
right.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, motion adjourned. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.